I'm a volunteer for the Startup Week here this week, and this is Ms. Elizabeth King, and she is the former Vice President of Human Resource Solutions and Services for Starbucks. During her time there, she launched the information management and information security function, as well as dealt with the company's global payroll system. In addition to that, she also does a lot of work with the campus and makes sure that she knows what she is doing here. She is a part of many committees and groups, as well as she has established a couple scholarships for the College of the School of Hospitality Management, as well as 2 scholarships for undergraduate women in the School of IST. And that is just a brief introduction of her. She will have a lot more to say, but let's please give a warm welcome to her, Ms. Elizabeth King.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm hoping that you'll ask questions as we go. Otherwise, this could get a little boring. I did want to start off by telling you a little bit about myself. I have a BA in political science from the university. I grew up locally here in Bellefonte, and I have been in Seattle for over 20 years. I retired in January of last year, and I have a place in Boalsburg, so I spend actually quite a bit of time here, and hopefully I'll see you all again outside of this room. My dad was a career Penn Stater. He worked at the Applied Research Lab, and I know that there's some work done with IST there periodically. I've been going to the Penn State football game since I was 5 years old, so the rebirth of Penn State football these last few years has been a very exciting time for me and my family. I have a brother and sister. They're alumni as well, and we are, when we say we are Penn State, in my house we actually sort of mean it. It's like our family business. I played on the Penn State softball team here, and the only thing that's really important about that is because of that, I'm a mentor to the softball team today, and I do a lot of work with the women on the team to get them prepared for what their life is going to be like after college. And so if anybody later wants to reach out to me about their resume or any of that sort of stuff, I'm happy to talk to you about that as well. As Garrett mentioned, I have 2 scholarships in the college. It has been a fascinating time to be a donor to the school because there's so much evolution within the school. And there's things coming for this school, I think, that are a little bit beyond our imagination. And it's an exciting time to be associated with all of you. So I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to talk to you today and hopefully give you an idea or two about what life after Penn State is going to be like for you. I'm on the IST advisory board, so I get a little bit of a glimpse into not just the fundraising that's done for the school, but how much potential there is. And I've had the privilege of, over the last few days, sitting in the Women in Technology event on Friday night, which was the incoming female freshmen that will be coming next year. And they're excited about joining you and being Penn Staters. And then I also, Sunday night, was able to sit in a donor event, and there's probably 70 or so students that were there. And I talked to your professor earlier, like it's reinvigorated me about our future, to see how smart you all are and all the things that you're going to do in your careers. And for those of us who are closer to the end or at the end of our career, it's just really nice to know this fresh group of smart people are coming in to replace us. I'm also a Penn State Alumni Fellow, and I just tell you that because it's a designation that I'm very, very proud of. The Alumni Association awards a few every year, and I think, I don't know, 2013 or 2014, I was given this honor, so I'm really pleased about that. And that's why I'm here, because as part of retirement, what you try to figure out is, what are you going to do to give back to those places that really have meant a lot to you? And I don't think much of my career would have happened without my time here at Penn State. And I really want to, be available as a resource for any of you who might want to talk to somebody who has worked in industry. So before I start sort of the next part about a little bit about my career, how many are actually like active Starbucks customers? Awesome, and thank you for the advertisement here today. I see a couple. Let me just flip on here. So I've had a nearly 40-year career in retail and hospitality since I graduated. I've been in IT for 25 years. Garrett mentioned that I was the first security officer at Starbucks, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I've also bounced in between information technology and human resources roles. The last 8 or 9 years I've been in human resources, more on the technology side though, honestly. And I think the interesting thing about technology today versus technology when I was here, and the technology then was a computer science degree. Technology is so pervasive, and the security issues associated with that technology so pervasive that many business leaders excel and succeed because they understand how to actually use technology in business, which is what is so exciting about your ISD degree. Is it's not just necessarily the application of the technology, but it's understanding how it can impact the business. And certainly technology has had a big impact on Starbucks. And maybe a show of hands, how many of you have the Starbucks app on your phone? Yeah, awesome. So, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in a little bit, but, that is obviously some entrepreneurial work that we did inside the company that has paid a huge dividend for us, and obviously has allowed us to extend ourselves in different ways. So we can talk about that in a little bit. When I was the security officer, it was so less cybersecurity than it is now. Our biggest concern was administrative controls and PCI compliance and Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, a lot more about the administrative and people controls than it was about having to worry about being hacked and Russia interfering with our election. Like, those were not things we were thinking about even 8 or 9 years ago. So what is coming for you all is a lot of, I think, really interesting challenges. And I think you should probably understand that most people in business don't really understand what you're learning. So it isn't like you're going to walk in to an organization and it's like everybody's going to understand, unless it's a very specialized technical company or a company that's devoted to security. They're not going to really understand what it is that you're going to do. And so communication skills is really important. And I don't know exactly how the school prepares you for that, but I'm going to try to drop a few tidbits through the presentation. Anytime you're asked to present, give yourself the opportunity to learn in school and do that. It's not a comfortable situation usually the first few times, and the only way you get better at it would be like a sport, is you got to practice it. And the communication skills for technical people, it may be the differentiation between you being able to be promoted and somebody else being selected. So please take every opportunity you can here to practice your presentation skills. So as I mentioned, I retired in 2017. I actually have my own consulting company, and that's more to make sure that I stay busy and don't do idle hands create problems. So I don't like to be idle, and so I do a little bit of consulting here in State College, and I also have a client in Dallas. So I do a little bit of traveling for those clients. I mentioned to you the difference between entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. And the intrapreneurship is kind of what you call internal entrepreneurial adventures. So I want you to know this because I think sometimes there's a tendency to think that to be an entrepreneur you have to go to a startup, or you have to found your own company, or you have to find a buddy and the two of you are going to found a company. And I just want to tell you that Starbucks is probably as entrepreneurial as a startup in many facets. So how many of you drink Frappuccino? Anybody? Okay. So that was a entrepreneurial endeavor that was founded, I'm going to say now, about 20 years ago by store managers in our California operations. And what they needed was to compete with granitas and other cold beverages. They needed something to serve in the store that was coffee based but wasn't hot. And so they bought blenders and they experimented with all sorts of different concoctions, and kept getting told no, 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 no. And the more they were told no, the more they were absolutely positive they were going to come up with something. And so eventually, Frappuccino was born. And when I started in the company 20 years ago, the whole company was about $1 billion business. Frappuccino has blown by $1 billion a number of times. So if you think about it, that beverage allowed the company to grow in lots and lots of different ways. And you can now buy a bottled version of that, or not now, but for a long time you've been able to buy a bottled version of that in a convenience store, and it just spawned a whole part of Starbucks that didn't exist. Now, there might be a question, well, what does that have to do with information security? Well, that recipe is important to us, that it's not taken by somebody else or discovered by somebody else, or our network is not hacked into and the thing is discovered. So there could be a lot of entrepreneurial work that might not appear to have anything to do with information security that actually is a company secret, or there might be some intellectual property associated with that. So there's lots of things inside a business that are not technical, but are still really important to be found. The same is true for the app. So how many again use the app? How many of you actually use your rewards and they don't let them expire? All right. So that is another situation of entrepreneurship in the company, and the whole goal of it really was just to make it faster for us to be able to get a customer through our checkout. It wasn't really created to do all the things that it does today, and that application went from, I have a fast way to pay at the register and I don't have to have a card, because people got tired of having all their cards in their wallet. Pretty soon we're all carrying a wallet this big because we've got all our cards in it. The idea was, as the phones became a lot more prevalent, to put the card on the phone so you didn't have to carry anything separate, and you'd always have it, hopefully you'd always have it with you. And so where did we go with that? We started by just paying. We decided that it was a great way to reward our loyal customers who were also, haranguing about, I can go to my local coffee shop and they'll punch my card and I can get a free drink. What is Starbucks going to do? And we found that technology could be expanded to allow us to reward our customers with drinks. Before that, we used to get, you guys probably don't remember because it was a long time ago, but you used to get a postcard. And if you had a reward, the only way to get your free drink was to take the reward into the store. Well, that sort of defeated the purpose of not having to carry extra stuff around. So we added the reward to the application. And then eventually we added mobile order and pay, which, if you listen to some of the analysts, maybe wasn't the smartest thing we ever did. But if you use mobile order and pay, which I don't, I'll be honest, I like to talk to the barista and I like to watch my drink be made, and I'm a little bit different now as a retiree, so I don't use it myself that often, but certainly when I'm in the store, I see people walking in and picking up their drink and smiling and walking out. And I just really want you to know that the thought of all of those things just really began with this kernel of an idea about trying to make it easier for our customers. Yes, sir?
A couple of Frappuccino questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. And I'm going to, just so you know, because of the stream, I'm going to repeat his question.
You said that the managers who had come up with it were being told repeatedly no. Do you know, first, if they were selling anything without approval, but then also what tipped over the higher level of management to get on board?
So the question is, were they selling something they shouldn't have been selling? And what tipped the leadership over the edge on actually approving the concept? So I think there's a couple of things. I hope they weren't selling anything they weren't supposed to, because back then the food quality things were a little looser than they are today. So how we worry about food safety is a lot different. I hope they weren't, but they probably were, at least sampling. I think the thing that tipped it over was that they didn't stop. Like they took feedback, they brought their concoctions, they took feedback from leadership, but Starbucks is a just say yes company to the customer. So the real motivation for having it was we probably eventually landed on a drink that we felt proud of, but we also didn't want to say no to the customer anymore who was asking for a cold drink. So it's a little bit of a combination, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, about company culture and how it affects not only entrepreneurship, but ethics and integrity, et cetera. I think probably the real reason was our customer really wanted something. And, just to go back even farther, when Starbucks first had its first 20 stores, they didn't actually allow you to put cream or sugar in the coffee in the store. We wanted to have this pure coffee experience. But the customers were screaming for cream and sugar, or milk and sugar. And so we changed that. And I think it's just really, those are the pressures, and when you think of security, those are the pressures on a company to kind of move in a direction one way or another that may have some impact on, the information that's happening inside the company. Hope that answers your question. Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to ask you all, you've had some exposure to something, your parents' businesses or friends' businesses. Can you tell me another example of either entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship that you think the class would benefit from hearing about? And if not that, what would you like to see on Starbucks mobile app or Starbucks app that isn't there right now? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Olivia Richards.
Hi, Olivia.
I'm a junior, I'm a math major, but my research is in IST. I'm a very passionate gold star member.
Thank you very much. That keeps me in retirement.
With the app, I was wondering what Starbucks is doing consistently to put it in front of users in the UX space, to be testing the gamification goals of Starbucks Bingo and those things, to try to continually keep the customer engaged while not bringing them into the store every day.
So the question is, how do we keep the customer engaged in the user interface? And there's a bingo game right now, and sometimes at Christmas there's a similar type of thing where I don't know that it was bingo, but it's some way to get more stars. So we actually do two things. There's some outsourcing of the UX that's done to people who are really actually very good at it. Because we now allow you to reload money onto the card with your credit card or Google or Apple Pay or a variety of ways, we also are continuously penetration testing it because we had some issues early on with the potential for somebody to actually get into somebody else's phone. As we've added more and more things, we've also had to put passwords, and there's a lot of things on the phone on that app today that are security related that really weren't there in the first iteration. And this is the part of security. People want to have their data secure, but they don't want to have to type in numbers and punch in codes, and so it's and you guys you'll figure this out if you haven't already. People want security because they want their stuff protected, but they don't want it to interfere with their user experience, and it's very difficult to find the happy medium between both. So we outsource some of the user interface to try to make sure that it's usable. We also use a very sophisticated organization to actually penetration test the phone when we make adjustments. And then we also use Starbucks customer focus groups. So they might be in Seattle, or they might be around the country. We make some decisions based on, we need two kinds of customers. We need people who are sort of the digital fluent, knowledgeable people like you, and then we need people like my mom who can barely make a phone call, let alone use her Starbucks app. So we need a little bit of everything in between, and so that's what we do. Hope that answers your question. Anything else? Anything else you guys might like to see on the phone or see on your app? Yes, ma'am.
I would love to see more using the Apple Watch. I love that it's easy to just flip my wrist and pay. But if I could order my favorite drink using the app on the Apple Watch, because you have favorites in the app.
Yep. So I don't have an Apple Watch, so you can't do that today. You cannot do that today.
You can just pay.
Okay. So the question was, could we do more on the Apple Watch? And I suspect, that'll come with time. The original pay and reload. Okay, I'll take that back. The original app, for those who use an Android phone, we didn't have an Android app in the beginning. And I think that's another situation for you all to think about with technology. And we had a class that's actually doing some work with a local snowboarding company that came in to talk to the advisory board yesterday. And they have all this, the snowboard company has all this cool technology on the board. Someday I don't snowboard either, but someday, eventually, they want to be in a situation like you can attach it to your GoPro and you can show your whole ride down the hill and all that sort of stuff. So the point is that cross-platform stuff is really complicated, and each of the different devices have sort of different security problems with them. So, being able to create consumer-facing technology has lots of challenges with it. So, good question, and I'll take it back. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So for you, when you didn't even start in computer and information security when you got to the company, was that sort of entrepreneurship for you?
That's a really good question. So Andrew's asking if, since I didn't have any security background, and I got tapped on the shoulder to create an information security and information management program at Starbucks, was that entrepreneurship or non-entrepreneurship for me? I would say it was more of like career risk tolerance. So the CFO and the CIO of the company wanted to be in a situation where the company could learn about information security, information management, but not scare everybody half to death. And so what they were really looking for was a leader who could talk about the business impact of trying to secure our data, but still had sort of the technical chops to be able to manage people who actually understood all the technology implications. So I don't know if they thought of it as entrepreneurship. I thought of it as a lot of career risk. And I think, that's another part of, as you're when you're ready to leave college and pick a company, I think you want to find places, because you're all bright, that'll give you an opportunity to do some things that maybe you can't even envision for yourself. And if somebody had told me even in 2 years before that I was going to be the security officer, I'd have been like, no, that's not going to happen. But I think, it's the thing you learn in school is that you can apply knowledge and soft and hard skills to many different problems and situations. And, for me, it was a little bit of taking a risk. So I guess that is entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship. And I'm really glad I did it because it changed the way that I thought about technology in the company. I graduated from Penn State in 1979, and my early organizations, like everything was internal. Everything wasn't networked like it is today. So the threat vectors were like your internal employees. And I think it helped me really think through as we put more and more technology in our human resources organization, some of which is consumer facing like our recruiting systems, and some are internally facing like our payroll system. Still in our big network, how you had to think about things like testing and verification and penetration testing and all that sort of thing. So I'm glad I did it. I'm not sure, I hope if I had the opportunity to do it again, I'd say yes, but I don't know because I had to think hard about it. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, all right. Any other questions or thoughts? Or just want to spill out some interesting things about information security? Okay. So I love this quote. And does everybody know who this is? Who is this? JFK, yeah, JFK. This is JFK. That's why his name's on here. But hopefully you recognize him by his face. So when I was a little tiny child, he was our president, and I don't know that I could really recreate the emotion of what it felt like in America when we actually landed on the moon. And certainly he didn't, unfortunately, live to see that happen. But it was like that time where, your dreams of what could happen for our country actually came true. And it was a really remarkable time. And I think the thing that's so interesting about even the space shuttle that we shut down is like the first personal computer, like that's what they ran to the moon on. Not like your phone is like 1,000 times more powerful than the computer that actually ran the technologies back in the early days of our space missions and our NASA platforms. And I think this is even more true today. Like when I think about the work that you're going to go do after college, you didn't decide to do that because it was easy, because it is really hard. And it takes really smart people to outwit other smart people, and there's people that are actively working every minute to try to undo something that a company has done. And we're going to talk about the Facebook mess in a few minutes. But I really want to tell you that I admire what you're about to do as you leave the university, because what you're about to do is just really hard. And hopefully this will be some inspiration to you as you do that. So I want to evolve the conversation from entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship into the aspects of a company that might impact information security and risk assessments and so on. Can anybody define for me what a company culture is? Does anybody know what a company culture is? Motto? It could be a motto. Hopefully it's something more than that. Slogan? Hopefully a little more than that. But yes, those are all true. Yes? How employees interact with each other. Getting a little closer to what I was hoping to hear. Thank you. Yes? It's the environment your company embraces. That's right. And so we kind of break it down this way at Starbucks. It's how we get things done inside the company. And there's two parts to getting things done. There's the what you do and the how you do it. And in companies that I have felt the most empowered in, it's as much about how you do it as what you do. And so this is the Starbucks mission. Anybody want to read for me? How about you?
To inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time.
Yes, thank you. And when I joined the company, I was not used to words like inspiring and nurturing. Like those were not words that were in the other companies I worked for, mission statement. And frankly, I don't even know that I knew what the mission statement was for the other companies that I worked for, because we didn't live them. And I would just suggest to you, as you're thinking about both internships eventually and then jobs eventually, to make sure that whatever the company's mission is has some level of resonation for you. So it's really important for me, myself, in my own performance to feel respected. And if we are trying to make sure that we're inspiring and nurturing the human spirit, one person, one cup, one neighborhood at a time, that doesn't happen unless you're doing it for your employees as well. So just a thought. And I try to think about this when we get to the Facebook example. So these are the Starbucks values. So these are the how we are supposed to work, not the what we're supposed to do, because that's all different by department and individual and role. But this is how we're supposed to work. So I just want to say, if you don't know this, a Starbucks employee is called a partner. They're called a partner because everybody who works at Starbucks is eligible and receives stock or stock options. So everybody in the company that's been there for a year has some ownership of the company, which helps us perhaps make even better decisions than we would make if we weren't an owner. So I would ask for somebody to read this, but it's long, and we're on this video, so I'm just going to give you a second to read through it, and I'm going to ask a couple of you, if you would, if there's anything here that's maybe a surprise or you wouldn't expect to see it in a company mission and value statement, or anything that you think when you go into the store you see, or maybe, hopefully not, but maybe you don't see. Because this should be happening in almost every interaction you have with a Starbucks partner. got all eyes trained on the screen. That's a good sign. Is there anything there that surprises you that you might not expect to see in a company's value statement? Or anything that makes you happy to see? Yes, sir.
I think the overall concept of giving partners or employees, commonly think of it as employees, equity in the company, that's not common.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could tell us what differentiates Starbucks in terms of that compensation structure versus other similarly sized companies. I think it's great, but that's not common.
Yeah, so the question is, why does Starbucks offer stock to its employees, all of its employees? So first of all, I'm going to go back to the idea of a startup. You know, Starbucks was a startup company in the 90s. It's in a technology city, Seattle. We were competing with technical companies for resources, and at that time, stock options and stock was a big part of the startup environment. I think, and so that's probably where the idea began. But the real reason that it's given, not only as an attraction and a retention tool, is that it makes you feel like you have some bigger than an individual a contribution to make to the company. So we all have to sort of join arms to make the coffee experience happen in the way that we actually expect it to happen. And the founders, including Howard Schultz, believed that if you owned a part of the company, you would give your very best all the time. And so that is the reason. No, those options have changed over time. They used to all be options. We've moved, and it's a little bit more complicated to have a stock option than an outright piece of stock, share of stock. We've changed for our store partners to more of a share of stock versus a stock option. But a stock option. How many of you know anything about the stock market? Because I might. Okay, I'm going to just quick here. A stock option is a promise to sell you a share of stock at a certain price. A share of stock is you own this thing. So when I own a share of stock, when I sell it, the money is mine. On an option, the same thing is true, but the option is a promise. So part of the reason I can retire in my 50s is when my first grants came, Starbucks stock with all the splits and everything was worth about $5. Today it's at $60. So when I sell that stock option, I have $55 in between that becomes mine. That's a little more complicated for a barista who maybe has 20 or 50 shares of stock or stock options. So we changed to make it simpler for them. Stock options also vest. So if I give you a share of stock, you can sell it tomorrow. If I give you an option, you have to wait a year or 2 or 3 for that stock to become yours. And that was harder for especially our students that may work a while and then leave the company for a while and come back. So that's sort of the evolution of that. But the whole notion is shared values. So the option and the stock becomes a piece of gelling us together. And Starbucks is a lot like Penn State, like you're an alumnus forever. So if you ever work there, you feel as strongly about Starbucks as you do about Penn State, which is not easy to say. But it's a good question, thank you. Is there anything else? Oh, come on, there's some words up there you guys not expect to see in it. Yes, ma'am.
It's nice to see where everyone is welcome and performance driven, but through the lens of humor.
Yeah, we try. We really try. Doesn't work all the time, but we try. Anything else? Yes, sir.
So, a lot of what it says is like positive systems, but you wouldn't necessarily think of like Starbucks as necessarily a food company, but it says that there's like positive systems, like challenging the status quo. I think everyone would be welcome, like all different areas.
Yeah, thank you. So status quo, challenging the status quo. What's really important for us is the transparency and treating each other and our customers with respect and dignity. I think in a world that's not very respectful right now, the tone is not good, it's a respite. It's a place to go where you can feel good about yourself and good about your coworkers and good about diversity and good about lots of things that we stand for as a company. Yes, ma'am.
With the way that Starbucks
Yep.
or there's Starbucks in the airport. The how do you ensure that your values are still being portrayed and lived in those locations, and how do the benefits change for those people because the customer experience is different?
Yeah, so the question is where we have a license agreement, like in the airport or in Target or other places where you might see a Starbucks that's not a Starbucks standalone store, how do we ensure that the experience is the same? So first of all, if it's not, I'm sorry, because it should be. Starbucks does not give the licensee free reign with the brand. So even in the airport, there's a Starbucks district manager that manages those stores. In Target, they're Target and they're usually host Marriott employees. In Target, they're Target employees, but they're trained on with the Starbucks training material. And there is a Starbucks. I'm not sure what the title is right now because we've changed the title. But there's like a district manager that's responsible for the Targets in this area, and so the experience should be the same. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, those words are a defined, specific, hard, scientific word, and so how they get portrayed or how they get actually implemented can be a little bit different. Sure. So it should be the same, and I'm sorry if it's not. I think what's really important to know is when people leave Starbucks through a separation, it's often for not being able to do this as much as it's not being able to perform the job. And that's, I'm going to switch now to Facebook. So this is, maybe I might have something in here before that. So this is one thing that I think is really important as we think about how hard it is to run a business today. There is a lot of struggle to make decisions that are a trade-off between your employees and your consumers and your investors. There's just a lot of struggle inside a public company about how to make everything fair to everybody. And I think Facebook is facing that right now. So this is Facebook's mission statement as I found it on the internet. And I'd like you to read it. And then I'd like somebody to, if they can, Starbucks is about nurturing the human spirit. This is a pretty stark contrast. And I'd be interested if anybody has a thought about this mission statement compared to the Starbucks mission statement and how this may have helped create the problem that we're facing today with the analytical data that has been perhaps improperly shared with who knows where. Yes, sir.
This mission statement seems to be more about the customer, while the Starbucks one seems to be more about bettering itself at the same time.
So tell me a little bit more about that.
Like this one doesn't really mention the company, how it sort of betters itself or how it helps with all this. It's just saying this is what we do for our customers and not what we do for ourselves.
Yeah, so do you think this is better or worse?
I think this is worse.
Tell me why.
I like the Starbucks one because, again, it not only focuses on the customer, but on the company
Yeah.
itself. So it seems a little bit more, like, for lack of a better word, trustworthy.
It is. It's more trustworthy. Thank you. It's more trustworthy. It's more inclusive. And this is about the what. So we talked about the what versus the how. And so this is more a what statement about what Facebook does, not necessarily a how we do it. So what Starbucks tries to do is blend into our statements to our staff and to our customers, sort of the what and the how. And this is not, there's nothing in here about how you do that. Everybody gets to sort of decide how this is going to work, right? I think maybe even more telling are the values. And these were taken out of, I'm not even sure this is like completely legitimate, but this was taken out of some things that Mark Zuckerberg, a couple articles I found on Mark Zuckerberg that talked about Facebook values. So focus on impact, move fast, be bold, be open, build social value is that a what or a how? It's a what, right? Because if you keep reading, it says it defines the what, but again, there's no at all statements about how. So when there's no how, what happens? People do how they would like. People do how they would like, which means that you are going to do something different than you. It's going to be something different than I might do. Hopefully it's all still ethical. Hopefully it's all still legal. Hopefully it's all still, on the up and up, but it's going to be completely different. So how do you think this might have impacted the decision to let this data become the problem that it is today? What do you think? Yes?
They're just trying to get to that what, like to be successful in making, impact and being bold and stuff without really thinking about the consequences.
The consequences, exactly. They didn't think about the consequences. They probably did, the decision makers probably did every one of those 5 things, right? But they didn't have any tethering to the ethics of the company. They didn't have any tethering to the customer or the consumer. They didn't have any, there's nothing that pulled them together to make good decisions about how to use the data. And the data became a weapon, right? It's a weapon in the election. It's now a weapon against Facebook. It's now, a weapon. We don't really even know where all the information is and how they'll ever clean it up. I don't even actually know. That's why we have smart people in data sciences to figure out how to get things back that they've given away. So when you think about your careers, your future careers, and you think about the current situation with Facebook, what is some of the lessons for you as you think about your future career? Yes, sir.
Obviously be careful what you put on the web, so your presence online, you don't want to be posting things that if someone gets a hold of can ruin your career or just make you seem kind of uncool.
Yeah, so for the camera, it's, we all have to think about what we're actually willing to put on any website, because we actually now do not have trust and confidence that it's just for us, that it's not going to be used for something ill-purposed. It's good. Yes?
Whenever we're looking for a job, be aware of that company's mission statement and that will happen in the future. On their goals and how they might go in the future with it.
Absolutely. So thinking about the mission statement might have an impact on whether you really want to work there or not, because it might have an impact on their goals and their objectives and their ability to meet those goals and objectives, and certainly might have an impact on you and how you do your job. Thank you. That's good. They're all good. How about some more? Yes, ma'am.
I think it might be important to, in the interview process, ask questions about the culture, and they could have it on paper but not actually live it. And
Yep.
it's important.
Yeah, so I think you're hitting on a great point. There's a difference between what you say about a company and how you actually act inside the company. And so when you're interviewing, you want to do your homework about what the company says their mission and values and goals and objectives are. And honestly, as an employer, I'll tell you that that's one of the first questions I ask is what have you done about understanding this company? And a little bit of homework goes a long way. But your question should be, okay, I read all this stuff. Tell me about how you actually operate inside the company, especially if you have a strong set of values and a strong set of ethical principles. You don't want to be in a company where those conflict with each other, because I've been in that situation, and honestly, it's not I might be successful in the job, but it isn't very fun. And so I think we stay longer. There's a reason I stayed at Starbucks 20 years. You want to be places where you feel respected and you feel that dignity is important, or at least I do. So thank you, yes. Anything else? So what do you think the people who helped make the decision to sell that data are feeling today? What do you think they're thinking? Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Too hasty? Didn't think through the ramifications? Yes. What else? Yes. Yeah, so I hadn't thought about that. That's a good one. So what else have I done that I probably shouldn't have done? Or what other things did the company do I probably shouldn't have done? That's good. What else? Yes.
Think about how they'll approach the same situation next time.
Yes, how they'll approach the same situation the next time. They'll think about that. Absolutely. So what if you had to go tell your mom and dad, hey, I was part of this team that gave this data collected this data and gave it to Cambridge. How would you feel about telling your folks you were part of that? You'd be proud? You would be proud? You would. All right. Yes. Yeah. I think I myself would feel pretty unhappy that I was not only had created this problem for the country, but I've damaged Facebook. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I haven't posted in weeks. Like I'm thinking about deleting my account. I'm just not sure, right? I don't know what to do. I feel unsettled about it, and I've worried. I've been trying to think like. I don't think I got that survey that asked the questions, and I sure didn't get paid for anything. But I wonder which friends of mine did. Like, it makes me question a whole lot of things that I really actually don't want to give much mind share to. Yes?
I'm not sure that everybody in the class and all of the survey and kind of the Cambridge Analytica.
Okay.
Would you be comfortable?
Yeah, and you help me if I get. So the question is, how many of you know what Cambridge Analytica and the problem is? Okay, some of you, but not everybody. So apparently there was a survey that was on Facebook that if you completed it, you got some money. And what that survey did somehow was scraped off all sorts of information about your friends. And that data was analyzed, so some smart data scientist, actually a professor, figured out that if you have these certain characteristics, you're probably likely to be swayed to vote for Donald Trump if we give you some certain things in your newsfeed. So everybody knows there was some tampering with the election. Is that correct? Everybody got that? Okay. So this Cambridge Analytica organization, not exactly sure how they portrayed themselves, but this data was sold to them. And Cambridge Analytica provided that data to people who could make things happen on Facebook. And people bought ads and they sent things to your feed. And, I kind of knew something was going on because I clearly was not going to be persuaded to change who I was going to vote for. My friends were getting these like crazy messages about, there was supposedly some sort of child sex trade going on in a pizza shop in Washington, D.C., and all sorts of crazy stuff that was associated with Hillary. And I'm like, what? Like, that's not on a reputable news agency. How did that happen? But I'm not sure. I know that I didn't fill out that survey, but I'm not sure that whatever my friends did or not. So I really have no idea what might be in Cambridge Analytica's database about me. And therefore, whether you did the survey or not, you might not know what they have about you. And that's the ethical dilemma that I'm talking about. Is everybody tracking? Okay. So if I'm part of that group that made that data available, I wouldn't be feeling very good today. So how many of you saw Zuckerberg on TV talking about this issue with, 60 Minutes? I'm not even sure where he was. How many of you saw him? Okay, too many of you, unfortunately. All right. He said two things that I think are contentious, perhaps. One was they asked him if he would go talk to Congress about the incident. And he said, sort of, I would say, maybe. I think a strong maybe was the answer. And what he said was, I'll go if I'm the best person to go, but maybe I should send my experts. So I have two sort of feelings about that, and this is the how and the what. Is he is responsible for that company. So I think on all circumstances, if I were with these values of Starbucks in mind, if I were the leader of Facebook and I was asked if I would go talk to Congress, there wouldn't be well, maybe. There'd be absolutely, and I'll bring my experts with me. Because as a leader, you want to have your experts, right? And I'm sure that there are experts in Facebook that know more about this particular situation than he does. And he, I think there was a fairly humble apology, although that doesn't get my data back, or it doesn't get your data back either. So I think this is, again, that problem of, we're moving fast, we're being bold, but we don't have any guardrails. So when something goes wrong, there's no plan B. There's no standing up for yourself and saying, the company made a mistake. And that's what I'm hoping we will teach you in this program, is that security and risk assessment and everything else associated with the degree that you're going to get has to have an ethical component associated with it. And any place where you go, where there's no how, you're going to have a lot more potential issues than in an organization that is really strong on what the how is. And I'll also tell you that the saddest day of my life in the information security role at Starbucks was finding out that we had people that were doing bad things inside the company. In an organization that's all about the how. There are still people that leak in, regardless of your screening process, regardless of your, all the processes we go through to try to make sure that we have the highest caliber person available to us in the world, that there are people who tried to sell data. There are people that tried to give away secrets. There are people that tried to tell our competitors things that they should not. So it happens. And it happens even in the best. So we want to be really cautious about the worst. And so with that, I'm going to just jump to, and this. When it comes to ethics and integrity, never, 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 never give up. Because it is what makes America great. So with that, do you have any questions? We have about 15 minutes? 20 minutes?
Yeah.
You have 20 minutes. Yes, sir. Yeah. So the question is, if I have a degree in political science, how did I ever get to where I got? So I remember I started off this conversation by saying it's really important that you have the ability to speak to others. And so I had this ability, which I probably learned through my liberal arts degree, and I was really fascinated by technology. So the first organization that I worked for was Macy's, and Macy's was the first really big department store to actually automate through point of sale their department stores. So I learned a lot about technology. It's I'm going to kind of call it it was called administrative systems. And what we did is we worked with IT to actually write the manuals and write the training documentation and do some little projects with IT in advance, like requirement solicitation and things like that. And I loved it, and I was really pretty damn good at it. So I just needed to find somebody that would hire me to learn in place, and I found that company, and so I learned all of my technical skills on the job, and I really love the power of it. I love the problem solving of it and being able to come up with ideas that nobody else had. Sort of went from there. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering what kind of research development Starbucks does internally in the tech space, like the next solution, the entrepreneurial teams, do they operate within and how?
Yeah, so I think so. The question is how does Starbucks approach technical R&D? And when you're not a technical company, there's a couple of things you do. First of all, you leverage the heck out of your vendors, right? So there's a lot of, I'm going to call it business management of our vendors about what they've got going on inside their thoughts of roadmap and strategy. We have a technical strategy team, which is constantly kind of on the bleeding edge of what's coming and what we might need to do to be prepared for things that we can't even think of today. And then it's just great ideas by our staff. And what I wish we had, what we don't have, is companies like 3M, they actually devote part of their week to coming up with great ideas. And I wish we had that capacity. Like right now, everybody's probably working a 50-hour work week minimally in IT anyways, because there's just so much going on. So it's just hard to allocate that. So instead of being able to say everybody gets 2 hours a week to experiment and come up with great ideas, we have this group of strategists that actually do that. And then they work really closely with the business strategist because, they're thinking of new things to do inside our Starbucks store with the data, especially with the data. I think a lot of the innovation for Starbucks in the future is going to be understanding better our customer, and that will create innovation not in just our products, but also perhaps in our services. So hopefully that answered your question. Yes, sir. Thanks for your service, by the way.
Was there any moment over time you might have realized that you made a mistake and used their core values to fix that or make it better?
That's a really good question. So the question is, did I use the core values to fix a problem I created, or maybe hopefully more likely not do something that wasn't the right thing to do? I think for me, we went through, in 2008, there's a significant financial crisis in America, and we had to do some layoffs, which Starbucks had never done before. And it was a very difficult time to be telling employees that had worked their rear ends off and through no fault of their own were going to lose their job. So that wasn't necessarily a problem I created, but I had to make the decisions about who was going to have to leave the company. And absolutely use those values, not only in trying to decide where we were going to take resources out of my operation. I had about 170 people that were working for me at the time, but also in how we were going to talk to them. So when that day came, how were we going to send them on their way outside of the company? We're trying to retain as much trust as we could. And I'll tell you, as a leader, the hardest thing to do is tell somebody who hasn't done anything wrong that they don't have a job anymore. So I think what I would say is that I probably used them more to make sure that I did the right thing than to try to undo. When I was there, was April 15th, tax day, in 1999. I had a person on our staff that introduced something into our point of sale software that basically made all the cash registers inoperable. And it was the most unpleasant day of my life at Starbucks. We had probably about 1,500 stores at the time, and the only thing we could do was, if you came into the store, was to give you the product. There was no way to take your money, and there was no way to ring, and it was just basically a total disaster for a couple of hours. I think the thing that I learned from that experience was I had to go talk to Howard Schultz and apologize for the error, which wasn't the easiest thing in the universe. I wasn't very happy. But I think the thing that I loved was, some companies just wouldn't have opened the store. They would have just said, "We got a problem, and sorry, but you're not going to get your coffee today." We didn't do that. And so, in that crisis moment, at the time, we weren't making enough money to really give product away for free. But that's how I learned in those early days, this is how this company operates. And so I think in terms of even though he was unhappy, the way that I talked to my staff about the problem wasn't, it was, what are we going to learn from this? Make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's also a little bit of the difference in a company that's about the how and not just the what. because I've worked for companies where whoever did that would have been fired. And I don't even really know who did it. And I don't really ever really care. The error is one thing. The recovery is really the important lesson, and that's what Facebook is not doing. They're not recovering from this, right? They made an error, and we all make errors. It's the maturity of the response that really matters. So I hope that answers your question. All right. Anything else? Sir.
You talked, well, this is one of the concepts we're going to talk about soon in this class, security education, training, and awareness. Just kind of in broad strokes, how Starbucks handles that, and if you've seen anything that's especially effective or especially not effective to get employees in an information security mindset.
Yeah, so we do some online training every year, and it's sort of the vaccination training. When we first launched the information training, or the information security and information management organization, we did a lot of hands-on training. And this is what makes Starbucks awesome, is that we used being present, connecting with transparency, and dignity and respect for how we talked about data. So the data belongs to somebody, or it's about somebody. You know, it's about their transaction, or it's about their human resources data, or it's something that can be attached to a person, a credit card, et cetera. And I think what's really effective about trying to train and educate is being able to tie it back to something that the company values. And so for us, it was pretty easy, actually. And I think the most impassioned conversation I had was with the management team. Starbucks would have a manager quarterly forum where anybody who was a leader of others would come to that meeting. And I talked about if it was your information, or if it was your parents' information. How would you expect it to be treated using dignity and respect as the lens? And I think it was really effective, so it's not bulletproof. But I think being able to tie the whole conversation about, you know, administrative controls and people controls and any other kind of controls that where the person has some ability to impact it is really important, including leaving things on your desk that have private information on it. So that answers your question, but that's about the best I'm going to do today. All right, thank you. Good question. All good questions. How about somebody who hasn't spoken yet? Yes, sir.
I just had a question, or kind of wondering, in the position that you were in throughout your career, do you have any recommendations in the world?
Yeah.
Getting a job, whether that be a certification, an internship, do you have any recommendations?
So the question is, what would I recommend for IST students about getting their first job? So the first thing, unfortunately, that it starts with is a great resume. And I know from the advisory board, we might not have all the resources in IST that you actually need to help you have a great resume. So, you know, I'm going to tell you that there are lots and lots of alumni in the area. And if you are having trouble getting a resource here at the school, see if you can find an alumnus in the area that can help you with your resume. It's really critical. I think the second part is your LinkedIn profile. How many of you have a LinkedIn profile? Awesome. If you don't have one, you should think about it. I think that's the other way. And I actually one of the softball players is an IST grad, and she works for Boeing now. And Boeing actually reached out to her through LinkedIn. She had not applied there. She's doing fantastic, as you all will do when you get out. Finding the first job is the hardest because you don't have a lot of internship experience, and the resume and LinkedIn is as applicable to that as it is to the first job. But I would really say make sure that your resume is as good as you can possibly make it. In terms of experiences, you know, the part about this IST program is a lot of employers come on campus. If you're not particularly interested in them, like I would be going to, Mark, what's the other things called? Pro Expo. Yeah, I would be going, even if you're just standing and watching the seniors or juniors or sophomores jonesing with the employers. Like you do not want your first experience to be like your first experience. You want your first experience to be informed by watching others. I don't know if you have classes with sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I bet you do. Like I would, if you have a friend that's been through the process, I'd definitely talk to them. But what's going to get you the job is your communication skills. Like they'll check all your technical stuff. They'll check off, that you have those things that they really want. But they're looking for somebody that, has leadership skills, and leadership skills are shown through communication skills. So, practice. That's why I told you to, if you can get up in front of a group and talk, do that. The other thing is, I don't know exactly how to say this, so I'm not going to be a little campus about it. Penn State student work ethic is different than other schools, and you should be proud of that, and you should talk about that. When I get a Penn State resume, it's a different, and I know I'm a Penn Stater, but I'm not alone in that. When I get a Penn State resume, and there are a lot of friends that I have that are not Penn State, look at that a little differently, right? So don't be afraid to talk about your experience here, because people have a high expectation. There's a reason we're like the number 1 or 2 ranked school in terms of places people want to come to find students. So do your homework and do your internships and make sure you have a great resume and make sure you have a LinkedIn profile. And if you're concerned at all about interviewing, do some mock interviews with either the career services group here or your friends, or you can practice. You should practice. Practice makes perfect. You're welcome. Yes.
So I'm a business student, and I was wondering what would be something you would tell a business student with IST, or something we should understand about working with security people, because we don't know those kind of things.
Yeah, so the question is, I'm a business student, and I want to understand what I should learn about working with technology so that I can go be a kick-ass business person. That's really what you're asking, right? So, the truth is today, there's not a role in almost any company that doesn't have some technology components to it. And so I would say that the comfort in being, I'm terrific that are you in this class because of this talk, or are you a student in this class? Okay. Entrepreneurship minor, which is awesome. I think the more that you can be around people who can talk about technology in a non-threatening, non-technical, non-jargon, non-funny words, non-abbreviations, the more that you can talk to people who can help you understand how technology can enable a business, the better off you'll be. And I'm sincere when I say this. Most business leaders today, especially younger ones, can apply technology to their work experience, at least conceptually. They may not know how to write a line of code, and that's not a problem, but they know how technology can make their business run better, and that's really important. You're welcome. Yes?
Can you talk about the beginnings of when you started the information security and what hurdles you had to go through, go over,
Yeah.
Actually begin succeeding in that field?
So Starbucks, so the question is, how did Starbucks start information security, and how did I sort of learn about it? I think is probably a 2-part question. So the driving business lever was industry PCI compliance and Sarbanes-Oxley. Does everybody know what those are? Yeah, if you don't and you're in this class, go home and Google those, because that's sort of the beginning of information security as a serious part of a business strategy. It wasn't, and those are around compliance. We haven't even gotten to enablement yet. It started and it was all about, we've got to comply with these laws, and if we don't, we're going to have fines and problems. We had employed a Big 5 consulting company to help us understand what the security officer should be like and a roadmap of projects. And so before I took I guess I had taken the job, but before I actually started doing anything, I spent probably a month with them as often as I could, just learning, what do I need to know? And I had a technology background, so it wasn't like I didn't understand. It just was a different way of thinking about technology and what we needed to do. And then from there, we started the training program people in the organization understood it. We needed to put technical controls in our data center, which was awful. There was just a lot of different things. So with the CIO, which was really important that he wanted me to be in this position, I worked with the VP of technical architecture there, and we started fixing the technical elements. I had a training and awareness person. We started fixing the people processes. But, I think, I would spend 10 hours at Starbucks and then go home and read till I fell asleep, because there's so much to learn, and it's even more complex now. But I think it's like any other big project. We just had to start somewhere and get smart people to help us figure out where that starting point was. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I could take one more question before we break for the day. Did you learn anything today? I hope so. If not, then this was a long hour and 20 minutes. What did you learn? Sure. Yeah, it's all right.
In your position, reconciling working both with information technology employees and business strategy employees, how did you find aligning visionaries with people who are being?
It's like a religious war. So the question is, how do you sort of navigate the chasm between the visionaries and those who have practically got to try to figure out how to implement that? And I think that's where the political science came in quite because you have to paint a picture of where you're going. And again, in a company that's all about entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, it's easier to have a conversation with employees about partners where we want to go as a company. And then you have to help them build, you have to help them see that this crazy ass thing that just we do, how you go about it in a practical implementation plan. And I didn't win them all. Like, I sometimes had to take people with me kicking and screaming. But in the end, if you have a visionary leader, which Howard Schultz and his leadership team certainly are, and you explain to people when they're being hired that being able to move the status quo is really critical, it's a little bit of a combination of regurgitating the stuff that theoretically is why you hired them in the first place. But if you don't have a visionary leader, it's really a lot more difficult because people aren't we're all change resistant, no matter, I am too. We say we want change, but we actually don't like it very much. So I think it's just really important that you talk about change management, that you have a plan for the change management, that you can go from something highly conceptual to something that's really practical, and that's what the leader's role is, to try to fill that gap. But it's not easy. Good question. Anybody else have anything? Well, thank you very, very much for your attention. And, if I can do anything for you, I'm going to be around for a little bit. Thank you.